Vera glanced at the clock on the wall, just making sure of her time. She had arranged to meet her friend Amanda for lunch, but had put her watch in her purse to keep it from getting wet while she did some washing and tidying up in the shelter kitchen. Dirty plates and utensils just seemed to accumulate. Some of the volunteers just left things lying around too. So, with a few minutes to spare, she used them to tidy up and rearrange some cooking pots and pans on the kitchen shelves in the shelter. The shelter had been set up by some of the neighborhood churches to provide meals and cover for female indigents in cold weather. They would come along and be given a bowl of hot soup, made by other volunteers. They would also get day-old buns or bread donated by one of the big grocery chains. These were usually only slightly stale, and still quite palatable if heated on the microwave or toasted. When the shelter had enough volunteers, it could also supply beds, or at least mattresses, for those indigents that needed them. They could even have showers and get their clothes laundered by another group of volunteers. Vera had been volunteering there for a year now. She had been at a bit of a loose end after her husband Morris died unexpectedly from a stroke. He had left her well enough provided for and she was quite self-sufficient, but lately she had begun to feel lonely and at a loose end. Her two daughters, Susan and Janice, were at college but unfortunately at opposite ends of the country, so she saw them only a few times in the year. So, when she found she had time on her hands, she had been pleased and glad to help when a friend suggested she become a volunteer for the shelter. She had only been working there only a few weeks when some other volunteers, impressed by her organizational skills, had suggested that she should take on more of an administrative role. As a homemaker, she was more than used to multitasking, but she had joked that her skills were a legacy from her early business days. She had been flattered with the suggestion and had thanked them but told them that she was not quite ready for that. Besides, volunteers could be notoriously difficult to manage and she had had enough of personal conflict in offices or boards of directors when she worked before her first daughter was born. She had just finished the tidying up when she decided it was time to leave. She put on her coat, gloves, and hat against the winter weather. Automatically she checked herself in the mirror by the kitchen door, straightened her hat and tucked away a curl of hair that had escaped. She was pleased with her looks. Her hair was still dark and glossy with only a few white strands showing. She rubbed few fingers over her cheeks. She used makeup when necessary, but her skin was still smooth and only a few lines showed at her eyes. She slowly turned in front of the mirror, checking herself. She thought she looked reasonably attractive, and when she stood upright and drew in her breath, her figure, even under her coat, still showed curves in all the right places. Maybe if some man, she wondered. Then she reproached herself. She had only been widowed a year. There was time enough to meet men and perhaps start seeing someone, casually to begin with, of course. She thought of her lifestyle too. She was now managing to fill just about all of her spare time with various activities. How would a man fit into that? Or were these activities only a compensation for not having some man in her life? She thought with just a little pang of the physical parts of marriage, but then there were the adjustments she would have to make in her life with another man. No, perhaps she wasn't ready. Not yet anyway. The restaurant was only a block away. She would not see many of the indigent women who used the shelter. They would only start to trickle in when it began to get dark and tried to avoid being out after dark if she was alone. Her friend Amanda was already in the restaurant when she arrived. She stood up and they embraced. Amanda was much younger than Vera, only in her 20s. She was the daughter of a former neighbor, so they had actually known each other a long time. Although Amanda had moved away with her parents to another part of the city, she and Vera had met again unexpectedly at a meeting and, after catching up, they had arranged to meet again. Since then they had become firm friends, despite their age difference. Amanda was red-haired, medium height with a slim graceful figure and a vivacious manner. She had just graduated from university and worked with a design firm. "So, how was your day, Vera?" Amanda asked, after they had both ordered. "You know that women's shelter I help out at? Well, I spent most of the morning there, just doing general stuff, and working in the kitchen, even doing some tidying up. Some of the volunteers, bless them, just put everything into the refrigerators then forget them. Yes, I knew you helped there. Who are the women that use the shelter? Oh, we get a wide variety. Some have their own accommodation but money is short so they can get a good meal with us. Some are just lonely and it's a way too to get to socialize and talk to others. There are widows, and some others are unmarried and have no relatives. Then there are a few who are real down and outs, street people. Some have mental health issues too. It makes one wonder what things happened in their lives that they have been reduced to being destitute like that. I suppose it could be any number of things. Circumstances. Some made wrong decisions. Only women? Yes, but it's not that men don't have problems too. In fact, there are lots of men need help, but it's just that our particular mandate is to deal with women. At least there aren't as many women as men need our help. It varies too. We have a few regulars and some come and go. Some just disappear. She shook her head. But, enough of me. How was your day? You mentioned last week that there were going to be some changes in your office. Oh, they're working their way down the food chain. I've a new boss in my department, or one that I report to anyway. He's some relative of the owner of the business. He was transferred from another office. My previous boss was the one who really got the company on its feet, but as soon as it started turning a good profit they edged him out. Yeah, nepotism. It's too early to say how the new guy will work out. I'll be charitable and wait and see, but I've heard his manner needs some improvement. In what way? Amanda lowered her voice. Another tale I shouldn't tell outside the office, but I've heard he's a bit of a bully, especially to women. That's really not acceptable anymore, Vera said severely. Actually, it never was. Yes, I know, but there's the problem of doing anything about it. I'll just have to wait and see how it works out for me. The upper management probably wouldn't be any help as it's said he does get results. I haven't been there that long, but I've heard some of the staff, men and women, grumble about him. Has he tried anything with you? No, not yet. How about the rest of your life? Weren't you seeing someone? Amanda's slight blush told Vera the answer. Yes, I still am. That's Jerry. Yes, we see each other about twice a week. In fact, I'm meeting him after work. We're probably going for a fast meal, then we'll catch a movie. They finished their lunch, embraced and arranged to meet again in a week. Vera had been working at the shelter on a winter day a month or so later. It was still mid-afternoon and the late winter chill was beginning to settle in again. She had already put on her coat and hat, ready to go home, and was just going out the door, when she almost fell over a small figure standing outside right at the door. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there, Vera exclaimed startled. This is a shelter for women? The figure croaked. Vera saw that it was an old wizened woman. Why, yes, but look, the doors are not supposed to open for another hour. She was about to suggest that the woman come back, but she felt the cold wind on her face and peered at the small hunched figure. The face was lined and pinched. The woman was poorly dressed against the chill wind and needed to get inside as soon as possible. Vera had no reason to rush home, so she made a quick decision. Look, why don't you come in out of that wind? There will be more people around soon and you can get fed. Oh, do you have a place for the night? The old woman shook her head. No, I don't. I had a sofa in a room with another woman I know, but we had a fight and then she kicked me out. I've nowhere. In that case we can maybe give you a place to lie down. Vera drew in her breath. But it's just for the night. I'm afraid you'll have to leave in the morning. She led the woman inside, sat her in a chair and studied her with growing concern. My goodness, you do look cold and you're starved too. Let me see what we have in the fridge. She rummaged in the refrigerator for some leftovers. There was some leftover cold soup and she put some in a bowl and into the microwave. When it was ready she offered it to the old woman. First, get something hot inside you. Here's some soup. That should do to start. Then you can get more later. She could not help from wrinkling her nose. The old woman was smelly too. Still, there was something about her that made Vera want to help. Look, she said cautiously, I think your clothes have got a bit dirty. Would you like to get them washed? Yourself too. A shower should warm you up too. We have one here and there's a selection of old cast-off clothing and footwear too you could pick through. I'm sure we could find something better for you. The old woman took another spoonful of the soup and squinted at Vera, who was shocked to see a tear in the woman's eye. It's been a while since anyone was so kind to me. Vera felt slightly embarrassed. Don't say that. I'm just doing what anyone would. Maybe not, said the old woman. She slurped her soup and finished the bowl. How do you feel now? Vera asked. Much better. I'm starting to warm up. You said more people will be around soon? Yes. Vera looked at the clock. In a few minutes. So just tell them why you need help. That was obvious, she thought. They will give you something else to eat and give you a bed for the night. Ah, here's someone now. It was her friend Rose. Rose was just into her 30s, a small, almost petite woman. She had a quick, active manner despite a slight limp from a recent injury in a car crash. She raised her eyebrows when she saw the old woman, so Vera took a few minutes to explain. Rose had no problems. Well, let's get right to it. Oh, I'm Rose. Your name is? Vera realized she had not asked the woman's name either, so she introduced herself. Oh, I'm Vera. It's Syble. Syble Jurek, croaked the old woman. That was an unusual name, Vera thought, but it went along with the old woman's faint accent. By this time several other volunteers were coming in and she checked the time. Sorry, I better go now. But you're in good hands now, Syble. I thank you, mumbled the old woman. You have been very kind. Her face gave a slight twist. Vera wondered if it was emotion or maybe that she was just still cold. Rose called Vera later that night. I thought I'd let you know about that old woman, the one called Syble. She's settled in for the night, but she didn't eat very much more and she looked as if she was in some pain. She had a shower and we've given her new clothes. What she was wearing was in absolutely awful condition. Also, I saw it when she was having a shower, she has an enormous bruise on her side. I think there may be something wrong with her internally too, the way she moves. A fall, or someone beat her? No idea. But, you know, it's strange how they cling on to things, sometimes the oddest things. We were going to throw out her old clothes, but she insisted in going through them. Something valuable, she told us, but it turned out to be only an old tattered book. She still has it with her, holding on to it like dear life. Vera felt a twinge of conscience. Well, just humor her. You know, we should get that bruise looked at. I'll come and get her and I'll take her to hospital emergency. But who'll pay for it? We'll worry about that later, Vera said. She immediately got into her car and drove back to the shelter. Rose was with Syble. Vera thought that the old woman might have looked a bit cleaner after her shower and her fresh clothes, but her face showed she was drawn with pain. Vera was very concerned when she looked at her. Yes, Rose, she should definitely get checked over at the hospital. Can you help me out with Syble to my car? She took the old woman's hand. Syble, we don't think you look well and you have a bad bruise. I'm going to take you to hospital. Syble's face showed alarm and reluctance, but she did not protest. Look, Vera, said Rose, I'll come along with you to the hospital too. I think you may need help moving her. At the hospital, they stayed with Syble until she was taken for examination. Finally, a nurse came along to the waiting room. You are friends of Syble, DJ. Jurek? Is that how it is pronounced? Yes, well, we brought her in, but we know little about her. We don't know if she had any friends or relatives. The nurse thought for a few seconds. Look, I have to tell you she's not in good condition. The doctor suspects a lot of internal bruising, or more. We've had her x-rayed and at least there's no broken bones. But the doctor is not happy with her and will have to keep her at least overnight. Then we'll run some more tests or scans in the morning. I would have liked to hear a full diagnosis, said Rose as they left. Well, it's not as if we are relatives and these things take time too. We'll just have to be patient. I'll check back at the hospital tomorrow. When Vera got to the hospital the next day, she was directed to a room where she found Syble in a bed wearing a standard hospital gown. Vera thought the old woman looked just dreadful. Her complexion looked even more yellowish against the white bedsheets and her breathing was labored. When she took Syble's hand, the old woman clutched her back, cracked nails digging into the back of her hand. Vera, I want to thank you very much for what you have done. But I've just got to get out of here. Look, Syble, just relax. This is the best place for you. I'm sorry you are ill, but I'm sure you will soon be feeling better. Syble did not look well, but Vera thought she had to encourage her. Syble gave a dry cough. You think so? Maybe. Did they run any tests? They prodded and pushed me, stuck things in me, took some piss and blood even. Then they stuck me in some machines, but no one's told me anything yet. Look, is there anyone I can contact about you? Do you have any family I can contact? I have relatives, but none that I want you to get in touch with, or who would want to get in touch with me. She gave a faint smile. I think maybe you are wondering about who I am. Well, I came here many years ago with more of my people, from southern Europe. We were a small tribe and we usually looked after each other, but there was a falling out and my own family split from the others. Then a whole lot of my closer relatives were killed in a fire. Finally, I was the only one left. She looked over to a small table. Vera, do you see my clothes anywhere? Vera checked. Yes, they're in that drawer. Look in them. There should be a small book. Can you give it to me? Vera rummaged through the clothes until she felt a lump and pulled it out. Is this it? It looks pretty old. What is it? This was the book Rose had told her about. She handed it to Syble. What is it for? Oh, just a keepsake for my family. A keepsake? Vera did not believe her but watched as Syble painfully, it seemed, turned the yellowed frayed pages, peering at them, then selected one and began to mumble as if reading something. What are you doing? What is it? She asked, but Syble did not answer and in a minute her eyes started to close. Slightly frustrated, Vera squeezed the wrinkled hand again. Syble, I'll leave you to get some rest. I'll come in again tomorrow morning. There may have been a faint nod, but that was all. It was actually later than she had intended the next morning, but when she made her way to the hospital room she was surprised to see the bed in Syble's room was occupied, but with a different patient. Puzzled, she asked at the nursing station. Oh, the old woman, a nurse said. She just disappeared. She must have got dressed and sneaked out in the night. What? Don't you know where she went? No, not at all. You mean nobody saw her leave? Well, hospital corridors can be pretty quiet places at night and we were busy with all the patients here, the nurse said defensively. Feeling exasperated and shaking her head, Vera left. That obstinate old woman, she thought. When she saw Rose later that day in the shelter she commented on the old woman's behavior. Rose shrugged. Strange. Either she did not like the hospital or she had something she urgently wanted to do, but I suppose at least she must have been feeling better. Vera just shook her head. Maybe. This is very frustrating. I hope she'll be all right. She should have stayed until they fully checked her out. It was a week later when Vera was working at the shelter again that she heard the door open. Be with you in a minute, she called, but on hearing a gasp and sliding noise she rushed to the entrance. It was the old woman, collapsed against the door. Syble, where have you been? She cried. You're still ill. Why did you leave the hospital? With Vera's almost carrying her, Syble staggered in and flopped down on a chair. You're ill again. Vera scolded. I'll call an ambulance. No. The old woman clutched Vera's arm. It's too late now for that and they could not do anything either. What do you mean? No, I must call them. Ignoring Syble's protests, Vera took out her phone, but before she could make the call Syble pulled her arm again. I do not think. I have long now. You have been kind to me and in return I want to give you something. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out the book. This book is powerful. It is old, and has a number of ancient spells. Yes. Magic. The woman was delirious, Vera thought. I am going to die soon, very soon, I think. Her voice began to tail away even as she spoke. A week ago I used it to treat myself, but I am too old and the book does not cure old age. It gave me only a few more days. I have no children, they have all died, and I have no close relatives either. By family tradition, this is passed down the female line, but so I want you to have it. I think you would be kind and use it carefully. It has charms, magic spells. I think you are a good person and you could use them. But use them wisely. Use them to help people. I ask you. She pressed the book into Vera's hands. Her own were shaking and trembling. But I suppose you could also use them to right wrongs. Her voice was so weak she was speaking in a hoarse whisper and Vera had to lean right over her to hear her. There are things there that can improve people's health, or for illness, although there comes a time when they don't work anymore, like for me. I used one a week ago. It improved me for a little, I was able to get out of hospital, but I am now just too old for it to do much good. They can remove birthmarks, hunchbacks, cast eyes, and the like. And, for very important ones, near the end. The old woman was struggling to talk, her voice almost fading away. Yes, at the end. Syble's eyes closed and she sagged. Horrified, Vera shook her, but when she heard a rattle from Syble's throat she knew it was no use. She sat back on her heels for a minute, first numbed with shock, then, gathering her wits, she called the emergency number. She looked at the old book in her hands. What to do? Then, a bit distastefully, considering its condition, and sighing, she slid it into a plastic kitchen bag, put that in her purse and waited for the responders. When she met Amanda for lunch 2 days later, Amanda gave her a slightly concerned look. Your face, Vera, something's wrong? What's happened? It's that old woman I told you about. She appeared back at the shelter a couple of days ago, but very ill. In fact, she died in my arms. Oh my God! You poor thing! That's terrible! She got up and embraced Vera. What happened? Vera told Amanda about the old woman's reappearance and getting the book and her death. So, I called the police and they and an ambulance were there very soon. The police did not seem too concerned and I told them all that had gone on. It actually did not take too long. I suppose they could call back to get more details, but I doubt it. Syble was just another street person. You said you have a book she gave you? A powerful one supposedly? Yes, she was very insistent. She seemed convinced of its importance. And supposedly it has spells, magic? She must have been really delusional. Vera gave a sheepish smile. Well, she said she had used one to improve her and maybe it was its effects or more likely her faith in it that got her out of hospital. I have it with me, if you want to look at it. I thought you might be interested. Vera fished it out of her purse. Actually, I didn't mention it to the police. Syble seemed to want to keep it secret, but I think I may just throw it out. Amanda looked at the book in distaste. Yuck! You really should handle it with gloves. It's filthy. Smelly too. But she took it and began to turn the pages, peering at them. What a strange book. It's got German words in a Gothic writing too and Lord knows what's on the other pages. It's not like any words I've ever seen. Let me see it again, Vera asked. I can read some German. Vera's eyes widened as she scanned the first page. Then she turned to another page and read it, then another still, looking more and more amazed. Amanda was alarmed. What is it? You look as if you've... I don't know whether to be amused or shocked, Vera whispered. It really does claim to be a book of magic spells. She grimaced. Well, supposedly. The first, there, it's to heal wounds. You supposedly read out the stuff on the facing page and it does its stuff. She turned over another page. And wait! This next page says how to fix squints and eyes. She turned over yet another. The next is to remove birthmarks. A likely bunch of stories. Amanda pushed the last of a pastry into her mouth and grinned. Still, if these actually worked, the book could put a lot of doctors out of business. Look, Amanda, why don't we get together sometime and we'll go through the whole lot together? I'm curious about this. Syble seemed to be very concerned about the book. If nothing else, we can have a good laugh about it. Amanda looked round the rest of the restaurant carefully, but no one was paying them any attention. She leaned over conspiratorially. She whispered, I tell you, Vera, we could try it here if you want. Maybe you can't see him, but there's a man at the table behind you. He's got a port wine stained type birthmark on his face, his left cheek. Why don't you try it on him? Just read it out quietly, the spell about birthmarks. You never know, she laughed. Oh, come on, Vera protested. That's ridiculous. Oh, just try it. It can't do him any harm. Feeling slightly foolish, Vera turned to the page and, stumbling over the strange words, she read them out, just loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear them, and then casually turned to look behind her. A bald man was unconcernedly eating a sandwich with his coffee while reading a magazine. He still had a noticeable purplish stain on his cheek. Vera turned back to Amanda. So much for that. I don't see anything happening. Oh, well, it's not as if I thought it would anyway. She looked at her watch. We'd better go now. But Amanda's had been watching the man. Her mouth opened slightly and she caught Vera's arm. He's started rubbing the mark. Just wait a minute. Vera did not dare stare at him, so she watched Amanda's face as her jaw dropped even further. It's worked! Amanda gasped, just under her breath. Come on, let's get out of here. What happened? Vera asked when they were outside. It was just a minute or so after you read that. The guy started rubbing at his birthmark, slightly absent-mindedly. Then, when he removed his finger, I could see that the mark was just fading away until the skin became no different from the rest of his face. He obviously didn't feel any pain, but he's going to get a surprise when he next looks in a mirror. Vera pointed to the book. You mean that thing really works? That worries me. It's not rational. I shouldn't believe it. Rational or not, the book could have a lot of potential. We should look at the rest of these spells and try them, Amanda countered. Maybe there's potential, but a lot of danger too. We don't know what we're getting into. Don't you think we could use them wisely? Vera thought and sighed. Yes, I suppose we should look at the others. When do you want to do this? Amanda looked at her watch. I'd love to do it now, but I'm meeting Jerry. I'll be over tonight. Is 7 all right? On the way back to their cars, they passed a flashily dressed man with 2 suggestively dressed women in short leather skirts and lurid low-cut lacy blouses under short jackets. Both women were fancily made up, but the makeup did not hide a bruise on the face of one of them. Vera glowered at him. See that? I bet he's a pimp and has been beating that woman. The scum, she hissed. I wonder how he'd feel if he was the woman. She gave the 3 a parting glare. Anyway, yes, see you tonight. She was tidying up after supper when she had a call from Amanda. Sorry, Vera, my new boss just called me. He wants me back at work for something urgent, he says. Oh well, nice to know you're valuable. Vera heard an angry hiss. That would be one way of looking at it, but he's getting to be a bit of a tyrant. He keeps changing procedures and schedules, especially for the women. I think he likes the power. He doesn't do it nearly so much to the men. Some of the women here are complaining it's affecting their family life and it's really awkward for the 2 who are single parents. Jerry has tolerated it, so far. Another that needs to feel things from a woman's point of view. He sure does, said Amanda. Anyhow, I can make it over tomorrow evening. I'll see you then. Vera had just had a bite to eat and tidied up when she heard the doorbell and greeted Amanda. I've been thinking about that book all day, Amanda said. I can't wait to get at it. Patience. How was your work today? Don't ask, she growled. That new boss is just too hard to please. He picks holes in everything and shouts at us. I think he does it deliberately. He likes the power. A couple of the women were in tears. I'm thinking of quitting. I don't need the hassle. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get to the book. Vera poured some wine and they worked through the book steadily, deciphering the old Gothic writing and translating it to English, but they just had to stare in greater and greater disbelief at the actual spells. Vera shook her head. There are spells here to fix all sorts of medical conditions, but their sounds don't have any resemblance to any language I've ever heard. I saw some words that sounded vaguely Greek, but that was all. But they're supposed to do all these things? It's incredible. We've already seen that one at least works, said Amanda. I wonder about the rest. They should be tried as well. Close to the end they were slowly translating some German when Vera, then Amanda sat back in their chairs, almost speechless with surprise. To make a man into a beautiful woman? Amanda gasped. Surely it's wrong. You just can't do that. That's just too far-fetched. Incredible, but that's what it says. Shaking her head, Vera turned the page to the next spell. 2 minutes later she had to shake it again. This one is to reverse the previous one. So reading one spell can make a man into a beautiful woman, then another can undo it. Now I wonder, said Amanda. What's next? 10 minutes later they had their answer. Vera was open-mouthed. This next one supposedly can make a woman into a man, and then it can be reversed too. What on earth would these be used for? Vera shook her head. I don't know. I can see spells being popular for changing physical deformities, healing wounds, curing fevers, helping in childbirth and so on, but this, to change a person's sex? Well, we know there are some men would prefer to live as women, and women as men. But then why would they want to reverse the spell? Oh, people changing their minds, or I suppose that could be useful for disguises, or spying, use sex too as a bait to get information. It says it would make a beautiful woman. A kind of temporary honey trap? It says that it makes beautiful women, after all. And good-looking men. Handy for seduction, I suppose. It could be for revenge too. So, what now? Asked Amanda. I mean about the book. Vera grimaced. We should destroy it. Its contents and power would overturn all modern medicine and science. Yes, social mores and structures too. She sat back and gave a shrewd smile. Or, we can test the rest to see if they work, then use them carefully to help people. That's what Syble wanted. That spell to make a man into a woman. Weren't we thinking the other day of how some men should know what a woman's life is like? You said it could be used for revenge. Amanda nodded. Yes, the pimp. Another would be my boss. Yes, we could change men who are demeaning or abusive to women. Let them know what it's like. It would be a kind of punishment. It would remove them from their positions of power if nothing else. What if they like the change? After all, we're women. I'm very happy being a woman, Vera said. I have absolutely no wish to be a man. God, me neither. But being made into women might be a good punishment to some overly macho men. Vera gave a quiet laugh. She looked over the spells again. Along with losing power, the sudden life change would be quite a punishment. Having to totally learn a new way of life, dressing and behavior, and how others look at you would be quite an ordeal. It might reform a few minds. I've got an idea. A faint smile came to her face. I think I know some more women who might be interested in what this book can do. We could form a group of like-minded women and identify candidates to be changed. What? Change the world? One scum at a time? Amanda raised her fine eyebrows. Yes, but first, we have to make sure this works, the one about making a man into a woman especially. We'd have to be cautious too. If this worked, and we changed some prominent people, the changes would be noticed and then awkward questions asked. It might come back to us. That could be a problem, but we can be careful, said Amanda. Now let's see. Who could we test some of the other spells on? Anyone we know with a cut, injury, toothache, birthmark? I've got an idea. You know my friend Rose? She had a bad injury in a car crash and it badly damaged her knee. She'd be a candidate. She might be willing to help us too. She's got lots of energy and she'd be committed. When Vera called Rose, she accepted the invitation to come over the next night just for a girls' get-together, as Vera called it, not yet ready to admit that the book existed. They chatted over some wine, but Vera found she couldn't relax. The book was foremost in her mind. Finally, carefully, she sounded Rose out and told her about the man with the birthmark. Vera watched the amusement, then growing skepticism on Rose's face, feeling more and more foolish. When she had finished, Rose shook her head slowly. That disreputable old book you got from Syble, that old woman off the streets? And magic? I can't believe this. She sighed. But you're good friends and I trust you, or let's say I'm willing to humor you. She pressed her knee. Frankly, too, this leg affects my life. The knee is badly damaged and I can't bend it or extend it properly. It's got so that I'm thinking about a knee replacement, in spite of the expense. I used to like being active, dancing, swimming, jogging, hiking and things like that. Now these are difficult. I can't exercise like I used to and I'm putting on weight. Worse, it's even awkward when my husband and I make love. I'm willing to try anything. She grinned. So, I suppose you want my leg bare to see? Rose unzipped her designer jeans and pulled them down. Vera and Amanda winced at the appearance of her knee. It was misshapen and the skin was laced white with scar tissue. Yes, it's ugly too. It would be so nice to be able to wear a skirt again with nice sheer stockings or pantyhose or even bare legs. Well, we might as well try it out. Do you want to sit down, Rose? Yes, let's get on with it. All right, here goes. Slowly, stumbling at some words, Vera turned to the page in the book and read out the spell that was supposed to heal injuries. When she had finished, Rose looked at the others. That's it? No abracadabras? I don't think it's working. Maybe wait just a minute, said Amanda. The one we first tried didn't work right away. Only a few seconds later, Rose suddenly tensed and her hands went to her knee. My knee feels hot, she gasped and caught her breath. Then she relaxed. No, it's just warm and it feels pleasant. My God! Look, said Amanda. As they watched, the knee began to change, the lump smoothing out, the many glazed scars on her skin shrinking to only a few fine lines. It was over in 5 minutes. Her mouth open, Rose stared at it, then flexed her leg and jumped up, delight on her face. That was easy, she cried. She wiggled her leg. It bends too. She jogged and danced on the spot and gave whoops of excitement. This is fabulous. Oh, how can I thank you? Vera took a deep breath. Well, maybe you'd be interested in a proposition I have. Let me tell you about some of the other spells. Rose became paler and quieter as they told her about the rest of the spells, and her eyes grew wide and her mouth dropped when Vera reached the last 4. Rose was incredulous. Change a person's sex? A man to a woman or vice versa? Yes, hard to believe. But if these spells are like the others, they will work, said Amanda. Vera took Rose's hands in her own. Rose, Amanda and I have been thinking that one of these, the one that makes a man into a woman, could be used to fix a few things. I mean, change some nasty men, ones that abuse, bully or do demeaning things to women, into women. Let them know what it feels like. The change would be a fitting punishment and effectively take them from their power or influence. The old woman I got it from suggested I use the book to help people. Well, I suppose it won't help certain men, but it will help all of those who had to deal with them. So Rose, Amanda and I wonder if you would help us do this. Actually, I was thinking of getting a group of us together, a committee of sorts. Rose's face lit up. What a great idea. Yes, definitely. I'm in. In fact, I can think of a few worthy candidates. But we need to test it first. Vera nodded. Definitely, yes. Otherwise we could be very embarrassed. I tell you, let's think about this over the next few days and meet here. But first, we need some suitable man to test it on. He'd probably have to be willing, a volunteer. And that may be difficult. Rose's eyes lit up. I've got an idea already. Let me get back to you. In fact, it was another 4 days before they could meet. Rose was the first to speak. I have someone you may be interested in. It's a young man called Ken Smollett. In fact, he's a neighbor of mine and I've spoken to him many times. We're fairly friendly. He might be just the one to test the spell on. You see, I think he's gay, but not overtly. In fact, I'm not completely, 100% sure if he is, but he's a closet crossdresser and it's, just his manner, subtle little things. A month ago I saw him picking out some woman's clothes at a local garage sale, and in fact I'm sure I've seen the ridges of what looked like a bra under his male clothes. I gather he has no girlfriends, and just speaking to him I get the feeling that he is unhappy in his male body. She shook her head. No, I haven't sounded him out, but I will if you approve. I was thinking that he would be a good person to test the spell on, or maybe he would even read it out to the other candidates who we identify. What does he do? Vera asked. I mean, would his changing affect his employment? Would anyone ask awkward questions? No, I don't think so. He's the owner-operator of a small consultation business. Vera had been busy taking notes and checked back at them. Looks good. So, when we try it on this young man, we need to know 2 things. First, does this male-to-female transformation spell work? Second, how long will it take to work? Third, any adverse effects. The other spells took only a few minutes each, but they were small changes, if you will. If a spell changed a man into a woman, it would sure be a drastic modification of the body. She shook her head then grinned. I don't just mean the, dangly bits, but there is the internal plumbing and workings of the body, ovaries and things, getting breasts, even the whole general shape of the body. Maybe it will be as fast. It could be it will take a lot longer, maybe hours. They discussed things back and forward with some wine. Some good ideas came out, some silly, and they laughed like teenagers. Eventually Rose said she would investigate Ken and report back. When they met in another 3 days, Rose described what had happened. Well, the day after we last met it was fine and sunny, so I took a stroll in my neighborhood past Ken's house. I was in luck and he was in the front yard, so I gave him a wave, went over to chat, but I was looking at him especially carefully. Yes, in a few minutes I was more convinced. His mannerisms and the way he carries himself are just a little different from those of most men. She grinned. Yes, most men eye my boobs, especially if I have low-cut top on, but Ken doesn't. I wore a short skirt too, I tell you why later. And he didn't even look at my legs. I checked around to make sure we would not be interrupted, and I took his arm to lead him. Ken, I asked, I have something I want to talk to you about. Let's do it away from the street. As I did so I rubbed my hand on his shoulder. He stiffened slightly, but I had found what I suspected. I felt the strap of a bra. We used a seat at the front door. This is all very mysterious, he said. He was grinning, but he was a bit wary too. Ken, I asked, I have something I need to know. We've been friends for a while, and I would not do anything to hurt you. Yeah, I should have chosen my words better because right away that made him slightly suspicious, but we have been friends for a year or so, and eventually I convinced him I was sincere. Ken? I asked, can you take off your jacket? What? He said. Then he got suspicious. He was about to protest, but I just gave him a hug and again I felt the ridges of a bra on his back. Then, to be absolutely sure, I slid my hand right inside the front of his jacket. As I thought I would, I felt the cups of a bra under his shirt. Rose giggled. God, it felt like he was even wearing an underwire one. Then he yanked my hand away. What are you doing? He stammered. He was starting to get embarrassed and angry, so I had to reassure him again. I spoke as sympathetically as I could. Ken, I would do nothing to hurt you, but I need to talk to you. Maybe I can help you. Help me? How do you mean? This was the critical part. Ken, and maybe you can help me too. I said. The reason I just put my hand on your chest was because I know it was rude. I had to be sure. I know you wear a bra. No. I'm not criticizing you, but I had to check if you were a crossdresser. I had suspected it. I thought I had blown it because he sat for, it seemed like a minute. His face changed from being angry to suspicious, then to resigned, and he whispered that it was true. He even had to wipe tears from his eyes. But that was a big relief. I had guessed right, but now I had to take the next part even more carefully. Vera frowned at Rose. Rose, you were taking a big risk, she said. Crossdressers aren't necessarily gay or want to be women. Yes, maybe, said Rose, but I was sure I'd made the right decision. Anyhow, let me carry on. I asked him if there was more to it than being a crossdresser, as I hadn't seen him with any women. In fact, I came right out and asked him if he was gay as well. I was right. His face got pale. Yes, I think so, he whispered. Amanda broke in. He thought so? I would have, though he would have worked things out. I'm not a psychologist, Rose laughed. But anyway, I carried on. Then, the last thing, I asked, Ken, have you ever fantasized about being a girl? At that, Ken's eyes got moist. Yes, but I know it's not possible, he said. He was almost whispering. That's why I just tried to content myself with putting on some women's clothes. So I said I might be able to help him, and I told him about the book and our plans. His eyes lit up, at first maybe mostly in disbelief, but with just tiny bit of hope too. I think I was so convincing he was beginning to believe me. So, I gave him some proof. I knew he was still skeptical about magic too. So you see, Ken, I said, we need to test it. I finally told him. We've already done one test, and here's the evidence. I hiked up my skirt and showed him my knee. He knew I had injured it badly, and he was incredulous until I showed him how completely fixed it was. The book did that, I said. And I have good reason to believe that it can also make you into a woman. That sounds fantastic, he said. But if it worked, he said slowly, I'd be a woman. It would turn my life upside down. I'd have to set up a new identity. I'd be a woman in all ways. I emphasized that we were fairly confident it would, but that we needed to test it. Yes, we want you to be the guinea pig. He sat quiet for a minute. I was afraid to butt in because he needed to convince himself. Yes, he said. I'll do it. I saw him looking round at his house. All this old life will have to go too, I suppose? In case people were suspicious. That was great. I knew I had finally convinced him then, and he was already thinking of the future. Well, I said, you could pretend that you sold it to or gave it to a sister or female cousin and then take up their supposed identity. You could even just say you had come out from the closet. But that wouldn't be true. You would be a real woman, not a gay guy or crossdresser. So, Ken, if you are willing, I've got 2 friends and a certain book I want you to meet this weekend. Are you free then? I asked. He said he was. So now the ball's in our court. That sounds very promising, said Vera. I can hardly wait to try it out, but first, Rose, has your husband commented on your knee? He must have noticed. Rose took a deep breath. Yes, he did. And I'm afraid I lied to him. I just said it was a new therapy I had seen on the internet and it seemed to have worked wonders. Fortunately, he didn't ask any more. That was lucky, said Vera, glad that Rose had been so concerned to keep the book's powers secret. When they all met again that next weekend at Vera's house, Rose introduced a very nervous Ken. After a few minutes, Vera and Amanda looked at each other and gave faint nods. Rose had made a good choice. Ken was obviously very sincere and they could proceed with confidence. He was young, in his 20s, and had a slight build. His fair hair was a bit long for a man, but still too short for a woman and would need some suitable styling. Vera wondered how his blue eyes would look under long lashes. When they had explained about the book and their plans, Ken looked at the book. I still can't believe it, but I'm willing. When could we do this? Vera spread her hands. Whenever works for you. As I said, we've got no idea how long it will take, minutes, hours, or days. We will do it here, at my house. It's more private. I suggest you bring along a selection of the female clothes you have collected. But it's more than likely your sizes will change. So bring them all. I imagine your height will change too. In fact, almost certainly it will, and you'll need to do a lot more shopping to get stuff that's appropriate and fits you. We can help you there. Have you ever worn makeup too, privately? His blush told them the answer. Well, we can help you there too, said Amanda. Another thing, Ken? Vera asked. You also need to choose a new name. Did you have any thoughts on that? Did you have any name for your female persona before? He blushed slightly. I thought of myself as Lori. Would that be okay? Vera beamed. So Ken had already been thinking about a female life. Sure, Lori it shall be. Ken, you're planning an enormous change in your life, she said. I hope it goes well for you. She checked her calendar. So, a date to do this? You'll need to get things ready. Would the Friday evening, 2 weeks from now, work out? Yes, I can get most done by then. Okay. Now, last thing, please keep this absolutely confidential. Rose and Amanda were waiting with Vera when Ken arrived. Come in. You okay? She asked. I'm all right, he said, but Vera noticed his hands were trembling. Do you want something to help relax you? Like a drink? No turning back once you've been given the spell. Ken shook his head. I'm sure. I've thought about this all the last few days. It's something I have imagined might be possible for a long time in my life, a kind of daydream. I'm ready. Vera took his hand. I just wanted you to be sure. It must be absolutely secret, so you will have to leave all of your friends. And please, never trust anyone with the knowledge. For you, the spell's effects could mean a long period of adjustment to your new body, how it moves, its physical weakness, at least compared to a man. And yes, if it works you will have monthly periods. Men have no equivalent. Then you'll have to learn how to carry yourself in the presence of others, to men and to other women, and women will be more perceptive. Watch how women talk to other women and men. Watch how they walk and dress. Try to get ideas and styling from them. You see, as a woman you'll need to pay much more attention to your appearance than men have to. Makeup and choosing clothing are going to take up a lot more of your time. The spell says you will become a beautiful woman. That means that you'll certainly get lots of attention from men. I would imagine too that you will eventually start to like that. Ken gave a gulp and his mouth opened. Rose broke in. Yes, liking men means another thing. You'll want their company. You realize that if this makes you completely into a woman, it means that you could get pregnant and bear children. A shocked look came over Ken's face, but it gradually softened. If that happens, I will accept it, Rose. There are some more things to think about. Remember them and let them guide you, said Amanda. I caution you about your new life. All the advertising and movies we are surrounded with can give the wrong impression. Being a woman is not only about having a pretty body and dressing in beautiful clothes, and then flirting and being pursued and pampered by men. You'd want to be very careful about these. You might find yourself attracting the most inappropriate men. It's nice when it happens, but here is more to a woman's life than that. I know, he said, but he shook his head. And thanks for the warning, but I've made up my mind. This is an opportunity. No, I'm decided. Get on with it before I change my mind. He actually sounded slightly annoyed. All right. I stress that we have no idea how this works. Thank you for volunteering. Vera laughed. It may not even work, but if it does work, we would help deal with any problems. I hope there are none. Alright, we've set up one of my bedrooms for you. We've no idea how long the spell will take to work through, but one of us at least will be with you all the time. First, I think you should take off all of your clothes and you can lay them on the table there. And I see you've brought your woman's clothes. Let's hope your measurements don't change too much, but then, you will have to get new stuff anyway and accessories. We can give you advice on these. So, why don't you undress and put on that dressing gown? We'll let you do that in private. Vera pointed to the bedroom. Use this room here. Call us when you're ready. It took 5 minutes, then they heard a hesitant cry. I'm ready. Ken was wearing a white dressing gown of Vera's. Then we can begin. Just to let you know, I'm as nervous as you. Vera took the book from the little box she had placed it in and handed it to Amanda. Amanda, why don't you read it? You've got a clear voice. Vera rose, and Ken listened carefully as Amanda slowly read out the words of the spell. It only took a minute and she laid it down. They all looked at Ken, then at each other. It's not worked, has it? Ken asked. Vera had to shrug. It felt like an anticlimax. I don't know. The other spells took only a few minutes to start. By a minute later, nothing had happened. She drew in a deep breath. I'm very sorry, Ken. You'll be thinking we were just silly women to try this. She shook her head. He gave them all a sad smile. I don't think you're foolish at all. Thanks for thinking about me, but yeah, magic doesn't exist. He had suddenly given a shiver and hesitated. Vera wondered if the room was too cold. Ken had noticed too. He gave a sad smile. I don't know what that was, maybe nervousness or someone walked over my grave. At that he gave an even more noticeable shiver and his teeth began chattering. Almost immediately Vera too felt goosebumps, then a sudden chill, and a series of minor aches on her body, as if she was starting an infection. Amanda peered at Vera and then at Rose. Are you two all right? Your faces seem to be changing. Then she gave a shiver too. Your face too, Vera said. She was feeling even more shivery and uncomfortable. She folded her arms close across her chest, squeezing her breasts. Ouch! I feel rotten. It's like I'm coming down with the flu. Amanda gave another sudden shiver. Same here, she said. And me, added Rose. I'm shivery all of a sudden. I wonder if it's the way the spell works, Vera gasped. And it looks as if it is affecting us as well. Amanda put her hand to her mouth. Oh my God, look at Ken. Ken was shaking violently, giving strange strangled gasps, and his eyes were rolling. He staggered to his feet, then just collapsed onto the bed again. It must be the spell, cried Rose. This is terrible. We'd better call for help. It looks serious. He looks awfully ill. But what will we say when help comes? Vera asked Rose. We were trying a magic spell? We can't admit to that. Let me think. Vera snapped. She prodded at her midriff and tensed, then stopped, surprised. That's funny. Just as suddenly I feel all right now. But it's as if my clothes don't fit as well. She stuck a hand in the waistband of her skirt. My skirt's got a bit too loose at the waist. She wriggled her upper torso. And it's as if I need to adjust my bra. The other women felt at their faces, then their bodies. Same here, said Rose, her voice hushed. And me, added Amanda. Vera stared at their faces and took their hands. Rose, Amanda, you should go and look in a mirror. Your faces are changed. You both look younger. And prettier. I bet I am too. She went to the mirror, peered at herself, and gave a delighted cry. You know, I think it's changed our appearance. It's actually worked. Or at least something has happened to us. Amanda was bubbling with excitement too. This is great, she squealed, but I just hope my boyfriend recognizes me. Rose looked into the mirror and ran her fingers over her cheeks. She gasped in delight. Yes, I wonder what my husband will say. I'd better try to disguise it with some makeup. Look, Cool it, you two, said Vera. What about Ken? I don't like the look of him. He's shaking. We should call an ambulance. She opened his gown. Her hand went to her mouth. He's unconscious. Maybe it's more severe with men, just wait for a minute or two more. Amanda suggested. Just look at him, cried Rose. It's as if his body is in a blur. You know, I think his body is changing. It's working on him too. Vera looked over the figure, biting her lip. Yes, but I hope we don't kill him. I have to see this. Rose pulled off Ken's dressing gown completely. Her jaw dropped. Look at his penis. It's just shrinking. Nervously, gingerly, she pulled it aside. God, even the scrotum is shrinking. Amanda laughed. Well, I should hope so. If Ken becomes a woman, she won't want balls dangling between her legs. His shoulders too, they're not as wide. I think he's shrinking as well. As they watched over the next 2 hours, the body slowly rearranged and changed its proportions. Ken's shoulders narrowed more, his waist too, but his hips widened. His hands and feet shrank. Look at his crotch, Vera said. It all seems to be reforming. Ken's penis and scrotum had continued shrinking, finally withdrawing into his body until his groin was just a pad with a small hole, then the skin split and slowly rearranged into the complex folds and ridges of a woman's labia, her clitoris and its hood. Vera was wonderstruck at the spell's effects. What the figure had now was a perfectly formed set of labia. It was a woman's body below them. Look there, Amanda breathed. I should say, she's getting boobs. Now little swellings were showing on the chest, first at the nipples, then the surrounding areolas, and finally the underlying flesh, swelling into 2 women's breasts. The changes gradually stopped after 2 hours, but what was below them was undeniably a woman. The skin on her body was smooth, her limbs were rounded. Rose spoke the question on their minds. How long until she, wakes up? Vera held out her hands helplessly. I didn't expect this and I've no idea. But she seems to be stable now. She's breathing fine. I don't think we need to call an ambulance after all. They waited another hour spent examining the unconscious figure, but every so often they could not resist checking their own faces in the mirror. This is great, said Amanda. We're all now real lookers. Vera nodded. Yes, that's nice, but look, we have important things we need to get on with. I mean for Ken. Lori. She appears to be sleeping fine. We'll just have to wait until she wakes up. We can take it in 8-hour shifts. I'll do the first. Rose, you do the next, and Amanda after that. Go off and do what you need to and I'll look after her. While the others left, Vera sat herself down beside the unconscious figure and made a list of things to do when Lori woke up. An hour or so later she needed to get some sleep, but with the events she could not settle, and she found herself continually getting up to check until she fell into a broken sleep. When Rose arrived the next morning they checked again, but there was no change. Vera even lightly slapped the figure's face, but there was no reaction. She sucked air through her teeth. I wonder how long this will take. I hope she doesn't stay in a coma. That would be awkward. Another thing, I don't know if you'd noticed, but we have a problem, or at least she has. Sleeping Beauty here is all hairy. She's still got men's hair on her arms and legs, and then there's the facial hair, and at her crotch, it's in a male pattern. She just looks a freak. Rose sighed. Yes, I'd noticed. Maybe she'll have to get a lot of waxing done if she wants to look reasonable. Pity, she actually has pretty features. It was only after another whole day on Amanda's watch that she woke up from a doze at the sound of a grunt and a sigh. The figure was tensing and stretching. Amanda cried out to Vera. Vera? I think Lori's finally waking up. Vera had been finally able to catch some sleep. She yawned, rubbed her eyes, and put on a robe. Oh God, that's a relief, she sighed. I was beginning to get very worried. They watched as the figure began to move even more with occasional grunts and gasps. Finally there was a loud gasp and her back arched and the body relaxed and her eyes flickered open briefly. "Oh, this is so great," said Amanda. "I feel like hugging her." She wiped Lori down with a damp cloth and saw her react to her touch when she touched the breasts. Lori's eyes flickered open again and she squinted at the light. "Where am I?" she asked. Completely relieved, Amanda and Vera looked at each other. The figure had spoken in a woman's voice. "You are at my house," said Vera. "I'm Vera, remember? You were given a magic spell." "Spell?" The new woman was drifting in and out of sleep. "Oh yes, I remember." She tried to lift her body but a spasm of pain crossed her face. "God, I feel awful. Have I been unconscious?" "Yes, almost a day and a half." The figure lay back, still exhausted. Suddenly she tensed. "It was a magic spell, wasn't it? You were going to make me into a woman. Did it work?" Amanda grinned and pointed. "Look at your body now. What do you think?" "My chest feels funny," she muttered, and when she looked down she gasped. "I've got breasts." Her hands went down to them, surprise and wonder on her face as she pressed them, testing their texture. "Oh, my arms and hands too," she cried. "They're slimmer and smaller." She held up both her arms to examine them. "They're women's arms." She suddenly noticed the hairs on and between her breasts. "But I've still got hair on my chest and on my arms. And my legs! It's man's hair," she cried out. "Will I be hairy?" "All right, calm down," Vera said. "It would be strange if the spell left you with male pattern hair, if it's supposed to make a beautiful woman. But if you need to, you could wax them and remove the hair if it bothers you." She winced internally at the thought of removing hair from breasts and the crotch. At her daughter Susan's persuasion some months before, she had got some sugaring done on her pubic area, and she remembered how the area had stung for a whole day. Never again, she had sworn. "You should check the rest too, I mean the new girl bits between your legs." Lori groaned as she bent and Rose handed her a small mirror. "Yes, you'll be stiff and won't be flexible enough to see. This will help." The woman gasped. "It's all gone." "Well, replaced is a better word," said Amanda. They watched as the new woman's fingers tentatively explored the cleft, then the moist opening and its delicate rim. "So it's all there. Probably internally too." "When will I get periods?" she asked. Vera gave her an encouraging smile. "I've no idea if you'll get a period immediately or if it will take some time. But if you start periods, it means all is working inside and you could get pregnant. You've become a woman, so I expect, like the rest of women your age, you'll have a few decades of monthly periods ahead of you, that is, unless you get pregnant." "Pregnant?" Her voice had a trace of wistful in it. Amanda patted her shoulder comfortingly. "Well, you'll need the help of a man for that, but that will be another adjustment and things to learn. How to cope with and handle men's attention, and the physical bits and activities too." Vera looked carefully at the woman's face. There were some redder parts, from the spell, Vera supposed. There were still traces of Ken's features in the face, but it was a woman's pretty face, with high arched eyebrows, a small straight nose, full lips over a small but determined chin. Her ears were small and prettily shaped. Her neck was longer and slimmer and smoother, its line unbroken by any Adam's apple. "But let's take things slowly," Vera suggested. "Lori? First, you still look tired. Here, have a drink of water. You should relieve yourself and have another sleep, and then I will get you started on your new life." But the new woman was becoming more awake and she struggled to get up. She gave another groan, but it was not as strong as before. Vera took her arm. "All right, you want to get going, do you? Here, Amanda, help me get Lori up and take her to the bathroom." "Yes, I need the bathroom," Lori gasped. She was biting her lip in concentration, but she swayed so much that it was all Amanda and Vera could do to hold her and guide her over to the toilet. "All right, sit down and we'll give you some privacy." Lori relaxed and Vera heard her release into the bowl, but she sat hunched until Amanda led her back to bed. In a minute she was fast asleep again. "What now?" Amanda asked. "We wait a bit and see. She's still weak. She will need a lot of support from us to start, but let's leave her to get some more sleep. Then she'll be ready to face her new life." Rose arrived and they gave her another 2 hours before Vera shook her shoulder. "Time to wake again, Lori. I think it is time you got more acquainted with your new body." The new woman groaned as Rose helped her sit up in the bed. This time she realized she was naked and tried to cover her new breasts, but Amanda gently took her hands away. "Why are you hiding them? Be proud of your breasts. They're a woman's birthright. You've seen them already. So have I. We're all women here. Get used to them. Go on. Feel them. Get to love them." The other 2 women were amused at her expression as she tested the sensitivity of the nipples and areolas, squeezing and pinching them slightly. "They're strange, soft then sensitive." Hesitatingly, Lori did so and Vera saw her eyes light up. "Oh, that feels so nice. You like the feeling, do you?" Amanda, Rose, and Vera were rewarded with a big smile. "And look further down. You're more awake now and you'll be able to see them better," Amanda suggested. "Welcome to womanhood." The other women watched Lori's growing reaction, somewhat between wonder and delight. "She's obviously pleased." "I may sound a bit maudlin," said Rose, wiping her eyes. "But I feel happy at what we've done. We've helped a new young woman blossom." Vera felt quite emotional too. Her voice was hoarse. "Lori, how are you feeling now? I'm sure you want a shower and to wash your hair." "Oh yes, are you feeling hungry yet?" "I'd love a shower or bath." "I'm not hungry, but is there any coffee?" Rose poured her some coffee and when she had sipped it down they helped her up and into the shower. They smiled at each other as they heard little gasps. She would be exploring her new body. She emerged, her face beaming. "It felt like washing someone else yet was feeling it on myself. It was very strange, but I love my new body and, do you notice anything?" She had not bothered with a towel. Before the others was an entirely female figure. "You've lost all that chest hair." "Oh, your legs too," Rose exclaimed. "Yes," she cried. "When I started to rub it, it just stripped off." "I'm sorry, Vera. It's probably all over the shower drain." "Oh, that's all right. It's a minor worry. I'm just glad it's one less thing you have to worry about." Amanda looked at her more closely. "But I see you've still been left with some hair, but it's in a girl pattern. I mean at your crotch and under your arms. You can shave that sooner or later as you wish. At least do it under your arms. Most women do." "Anyhow, that's great." Amanda laughed. "Yes, down there you could even try out various patterns, leave it alone, or landing strip or full Brazilian. Whatever." Vera was amused at Lori's blushes, but she had more important things for her to do first. "How do you feel now?" asked Vera. "If you're feeling better, I have a list of things to need to do," Vera said. "First, you need to try on your clothes. If they're not suitable or don't fit you, Amanda and Rose can take you shopping for new ones. They're younger than me and they'll have more idea what young women wear. Also, Lori, you'll have to get your documentation changed, I mean driver license, new credit cards and so on. You'll have to square things with any clients in your business or tell them you took over the business. Now, it's time to try on some clothes," said Vera. "This is what you brought. Put them on and we'll tell you what we think." Looking rather uncomfortable, Lori put on some of her clothes and when she was finished she looked at the other 3 women expectantly. They in turn looked at her with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. Amanda rolled her eyes at the others. Rose broke the awkward silence. "Look, Lori, I think you can do better than that. I realize the difficulty you had when you started getting female clothes, as a man." She fingered some of them and shook her head. These may have been all you could get for dressing in drag and in private, but, to be honest, they are totally unsuitable for you now. It looks as if you picked them up at garage sales and the likes. I suppose you probably did. Some are too shabby or plain and uncoordinated, others are just too flashy. They are just not what an ordinary young woman would wear. You just look like a badly dressed hooker. To start with, these panties you got. They are an okay fit, but they're too plain and they are worn. You'll need more and new ones, prettier too, to celebrate your new body. Maybe some lovely satin ones for special times. Now your bra. She fingered the garment in disdain. This may have fit before, but it totally doesn't fit now. Your chest is narrower, but you've got breasts now. The cups aren't right for your size and it's too worn. The elastic on the straps is gone as well. Then, your top you have is not your style or color and it's worn too, but it will have to do until we can get out for others. Your pantyhose will do, but you'll need more pairs or stockings or whatever you want for your legs. Your skirt too. It's neither a good style nor color for you and its hem is uneven. You'll need a lot more skirts and dresses anyway and some pants for dressy and casual wear. You'll need more of everything. And outerwear, I mean a jacket and coat, women's shoes and accessories. You'll need casual stuff too. These jeans you had were a man's style. They won't do anything for your lovely new figure. Amanda grinned. Bet you didn't think being a woman would be this complicated. Tell you, we should go out this afternoon and get you new clothes. You're about my size, so first I'll go home and bring some of my stuff for you to wear when we go out shopping. That way you'll look a bit smarter. You can't wear what you had. I'll give you a dab of lipstick too. A more elaborate makeup can wait till later. Oh, what about money? You'll need quite a bit of stuff. I have money in my account, said Lori. I can withdraw some or use my credit card. Great. Vera, do you want to come along with Rose, Lori and me? Vera shook her head. No, I need to get some more rest and I have things to do. You girls all go out and have fun. Vera's first priority was to get some rest and she managed 3 hours. When the others returned 4 hours later, she almost did a double take. Rose and Amanda were accompanied by a very pretty girl wearing a stylish light blue dress. Vera realized it was Lori. Her short hair was now styled into a female cut. Lori was wearing tan hosiery and bone-colored low-heeled shoes with the dress. Lori actually hugged Vera when she came in. Vera, I've had a great time, exhausting, but fun. Your hair and face. They look very nice, Vera said tactfully. She thought the girl could have benefited from longer hair, but she still looked quite smart. Yes, said Amanda. Lori had a great time choosing lingerie, hosiery and outerwear. She must have made the day for quite a few saleswomen. And then we were lucky. We managed to squeeze her in at a hairdresser I use and a beautician's. She got her ears pierced too. A pair of gold-colored balls decorated Lori's earlobes and she tilted her head so Vera could see them. How did you find shopping, Lori? A bit tiring eventually, but as you know, I liked dressing as a woman, but before, I had to keep it hidden. I didn't have the nerve to come out of the closet. But now, it's all above board. I can spend as long or as short as I want in stores trying on things and seeing what suits me. She laughed. It's almost expected, I mean, for a woman. I may make a few mistakes, but I'm having fun. I think you look really smart, Vera said. Actually, shopping for clothes was not her favorite activity, but if Lori liked it. Lori gave a modest smile, slightly embarrassed. Look, Lori, as a man maybe you didn't get compliments like that, but you're a woman now, an attractive one, and you may start getting compliments on your personal appearance. Accept them gracefully. Well, I feel great too, and Amanda and Rose were great at helping me. How can I ever thank you all? She asked. I owe you. Well, there is that one way, Vera said slowly. You remember our other plans for the book? She got a smile, almost a malicious one from Lori. Yes, Rose went over your plans when we were out. Yes, I can think of quite a few men that might benefit from the spell. It would make them realize what assholes and bores, chauvinists they had been. I felt their scorn occasionally. Yes, I know I was a man, but the behavior of some men just made me cringe. I got abuse from some men too. This change has been great for me, but certain men would certainly not appreciate it. It would overturn their lives. So we could have an enthusiastic helper, mused Vera. Well, Lori, it looks as if you were all right and you are adjusting well. I think you should stay here tonight, but tomorrow, are you ready to go back to your house? Yes, I think so. But I'm beginning to feel tired. Could someone take me tomorrow? I'll take you back, said Rose. After all, I brought you and you don't have your documentation yet. You should get your driver's license changed as soon as you can. However, I'm getting hungry. Do you all want to eat out or order in? Order in, maybe Chin's. Then I'll get to bed, said Vera. How did it go? I mean Lori going back home. Vera asked Rose when they next met. Not bad, said Rose. Unfortunately, a suspicious neighbor came by, but Lori explained that Ken had gone away and that she was a cousin. Smart girl, she had actually drafted a document that said Ken was selling the house to her. She also said she would eventually be selling the house. The neighbor seemed to be quite convinced. Yeah, but maybe she should move to a new neighborhood, suggested Vera. All right. We know the book works. Let's take a break for a week and meet here to go over our plans. Rose, I'll leave it to you to keep an eye on Lori in case any problems turn up. When the four of them all met a week later, Lori was as keen as the others. This has been quite an interesting week. I'm glad I had you all to help me. But I feel I'm adjusting well. She looked at the others. You have done me an enormous favor. I hope this isn't an imposition, but I wonder if you can do me another? I know another young man like I was. I think he might want to use the spell too. Would you be willing to let him? Vera caught Amanda's eye. They would have to be careful in case the knowledge of book got spread around. I'm not sure. We'd have to investigate and meet him first. Can you arrange that, Lori? Certainly. I'll sound him out. Anyway, let's get on with business. Vera led the others to her dining room table. All right, ladies, first on the agenda. But first, I'll go over our aims. For the spell, we are pretty confident that the immediate effects of our actions would be, let's say, rather life-changing for the subjects. We may think it's what they deserve, a punishment of sorts, and I don't think we should be too concerned with them, but, for our main aim, the way I see it is that we are going to remove certain men from positions where they have been causing distress to women. Their removal will mean that women would benefit. Everyone okay with that? I see no one has any objections. Good. So, who do we have? Shouldn't we decide how to do this first? I mean, how to actually administer the spell? Asked Rose. That has to be decided, certainly, but maybe once we come up with some candidates, maybe that will give us some ideas. You know, it might be an idea to see if we could do it to them all at the same time. Get them together in some isolated place. Okay, said Rose. So, my candidate is a politician of sorts. I was looking for some man who should get the spell to remove him from his position of power. This one is an aide to a congressman here and runs the local office in the city. That's Brad Woodcock. Brad Woodcock, gasped Lori. I know that name. Yes, Brad is a bit higher profile than maybe we want. I know we want to keep a low profile, but he's a political aide, actually a big wheel in the congressman's staff. But I still think he's a good candidate. Yes, I've heard of him too, said Vera. He's in the news quite a bit. He seems to get a lot of publicity and he shows his face at all kinds of social events. Yes, a real publicity hound, said Rose. Still, it gets his face and name known. That's how politicians work. You see, it's no secret he has political ambitions for himself, and he's been dropping hints that he would like to run for office when the incumbent, that's John O'Hara, who's getting on, retires. This guy is well organized, speaks well and has some charisma that would attract voters, but what's not known generally is he's got a reputation for groping female interns. He may have bedded a few too, but I can't get reliable information on that part. His groping is common knowledge, but the girls usually don't make a fuss in case it affects their own future careers. He's made advances to several of the staff women too. His hands stray and wander over and pat women's butts just a bit too much. Many girls have had enough and left. He has also bad-mouthed some of those that left. Why didn't they complain? Said Vera. Maybe embarrassment, maybe they just don't want the fuss of people poking into their lives, maybe some of them are politically motivated. I mean, they don't want to rock the political boat. I just don't know. How did you hear of him? Asked Lori. One of my girlfriends was one of those who left. She just got fed up with the system. Would anyone notice his disappearance? Asked Amanda. Rose thought for a minute. At work, certainly, but he's not married and has no close relatives other than a sister who lives in Europe, Paris, I think, with her family, well away. Colleagues might get concerned after a day or so, but some might be glad to see him gone. Sounds promising, Vera said. All right. Put him down for number 1 sleaze. My own candidate is a priest, Father Rosa. He's been in a local parish for a year now. He was moved there after quite a few suggestions of trouble in his last parish, and 3 years before that he had also been moved. His bishop seems to prefer to move him on from parish to parish rather than face the fact that he is a predator. I heard about him through one of the women who help out at the shelter I volunteer at. He's not gay or a pedophile. No trouble with choir boys, anyway. She gave a bleak grin. No, his attentions have been directed to any of the women who help around the church. He groped my friend at one time. Some women are actually flattered by his attentions, but most resent it. They usually don't want to complain. After all, it would be bad publicity for the church. Some women actually did complain in his previous parish, but the bishop pooh-poohed the complaint until it became serious enough. Then he swept it under the carpet. Finally, though, they moved him on. At least he didn't come on to any nuns. What do you think the effect would be if he disappeared? Asked Lori. I don't know. There would be some questions raised if he didn't appear to do his duties, but maybe they would think he had just gone off someplace. There have been increasing complaints about him recently. You'd have thought he would have learned. Vera checked her notes. So, he looks okay. I'll put him down. I've got another suggestion too, one of the local pimps. Amanda, you remember seeing him some weeks ago? We just had coffee. He was with 2 women. One of them looked like she'd been beaten. Oh yes, I remember that bastard. I saw him again the other day, so I followed him and did some investigations, and I was able to get where he lived and his name. Then I did some inquiries with a social worker I know, and I found this pimp runs several women, you know, in the sex trade. It turns out that many of them have been roughed up by him. One girl was even sent to hospital with a broken arm. She said she had fallen, but we know that's not the real story. I definitely want to remove him. Amanda gave a cold, malicious grin. I don't think anyone would be too concerned if he just disappeared. Vera jotted down some more notes. Yes, I think he need taught a lesson. She looked round, the others were nodding in agreement. We are agreed? Good. Amanda, do you have a candidate? Yes, there's my boss. He's called Mike Gunther. Look, Vera, I know this is maybe getting a bit personal, but his policies and actions have affected many more women than me. Quite simply, he's a bully, abusive to all his staff, but especially to women. And unfortunately he's the son of the owner, so it's unlikely a complaint would get anywhere there. He's not married, but he's divorced. His wife gave mental cruelty as a reason. There were no kids. And if he failed to show up at work? Amanda beamed. We'd all have a wild celebration in the office, maybe dance in the streets. No, just kidding, but yes, we'd notice. His father would be concerned, but his own work schedule is so busy and erratic it might take a few days for him to notice and be actually concerned. What about the company? It would carry on. I believe he has a younger brother who works in another branch but who knows the ins and outs of the business. We've met him and he seems a much more pleasant guy. I expect the business would survive, but don't worry. If it didn't, I could easily get a job elsewhere. All right, next. Lori, you mentioned you had someone in mind that we could do a favor for? She laughed. That would be a change from the others. Vera studied Lori. It was hard to believe the pretty young woman sitting at the table had been a man only a month before. She was clad in a vibrant patterned blue dress whose color matched her eyes. A pale blue silk scarf at her neck gave a bright and tasteful contrast. She now wore small fancy gold hoops in her ears and even had a gold bracelet. Vera thought back to the dreadful female clothes that Ken had used and gave a small internal shudder. Along with her new body, Lori had developed a good dress sense. Lori, I believe you have a candidate, but first, how are you finding things? Adjusted well? Wonderful. I can't thank you all enough. I love my new life, but I've actually changed my address just to keep out of the way of the neighbors, in case I accidentally dropped any hints. My old house is up for sale. Anyway, here's my idea for a candidate, but this is not for a punishment. She smiled prettily. It's another young man, like me, or, like I was. It's maybe a way to save his life. He has been bullied and frankly, I'm concerned about him. He's been suffering increasingly from depression and may become suicidal. He would benefit from his life turned around too. In fact, I bet he'd be willing to read the spell out and be changed too. It would save us being right there. Just a little problem, Vera said. One of us would have to be there to retrieve the book. Oh, I didn't think of that. Any family problems if he were to change? Amanda asked. He's from a large family. He's got several brothers and sisters but all totally disowned him. This may sound callous, but I don't think they would be too concerned if he disappeared their lives. They're a very conservative family. You didn't reveal the book's existence or the spells to him, did you? Asked Rose. Lori shook her head. No, I realize its existence must be kept as quiet as possible. But if I have your approval, I will sound him out. She laughed. And I'm not sure how to do this. After all, I'm unrecognizable now. He knew me as a man. Now he'd wonder who the strange woman who was coming on to him would be. But I know I can convince him. Vera saw approval around the table. All right, if you're happy he would be a good candidate, we can accommodate him. She looked at the others. Do you all agree? Nobody protested. All right, Lori, I'll leave it with you to contact this young man, but be extremely careful. She looked at her notes. So we have 5, a politician, a priest, a pimp, a businessman, and a man who could actually benefit. We would be doing him a favor, Lori says. The question is now, how could we set about this? She looked at Lori and shook her head. Lori, as I said, I think we would be taking too much of a risk to leave the book with this young man. We don't know him and the power of the book could be very seductive. Instead, it would be better if we were there to supervise, but then take the book away as soon as he has used it. However, we could also take this young man away with us and look after him while he recovers and then mentor him like we did you. It would be great for him if you could do that, Lori smiled. I still can hardly believe how great this has been for me. Amanda held up her hand. I agree too, but, for the others, we need to get them together by some means, preferably somewhere isolated and maybe a fair distance from the city here. Maybe we could even remove their clothes so that when they are found they're only naked women. Or maybe we could leave only women's clothes for them. There would be no clue to their identities other than what they said to anyone that finds them, and anyone hearing their stories would think they're just too fantastic anyway. That would let them know how vulnerable women sometimes feel. We'd leave the bastards to their own devices. Vera looked round her committee. Just thinking too, wouldn't it be better to wait until they have changed, but are not awake, than dress them entirely in woman's clothing? It would be even more of a shock when they woke up. It would take bit more time, and awkward too, dressing them, but I agree, said Amanda. Rose held up her hand. If we're looking for a place, I know an abandoned lodge out towards the mountains, about a couple of 100 miles from here. It has about a dozen individual rooms and a central dining, socializing, games area where lodge guests used to meet and socialize. It had a good reputation for wilderness and nature tours and programs, but it's actually not been used much these last 2 years at all. A wildfire burned up just about all of the nearby forest and the whole area looks just dreadful. We could use that. The owners come by every week or so to check so our candidates would be found if they decided to stay there and before they actually died of hunger, although it might serve them right. There's good water in a nearby creek so they'd have enough to drink. It sounds good, said Vera, and the others nodded agreement. All right, Rose said. I'll check into that, to make sure no one else would be using it. So, we have the place, we have the subjects, but how to get them there? Vera asked. Also, if it's 200 miles away there would have to be some strong inducement to lure them. They'd want a prize a week at a lodge in the woods, suggested Rose. Vera shook her head. Are you kidding? They'd smell a rat. Besides, a week in wilderness might not be to their fancy. She gave a smile. It certainly wouldn't for me. What would attract a budding politician? A chance of political slush money or campaign donations, exclaimed Amanda. They all laughed. Yes, that would work, said Lori. But what about the priest? Vera said. Addressing a religious group? Or, knowing this one, a meeting where there would be lots of women? Maybe charitable donations to the church? That could put him in good graces with the church hierarchy. And what about the pimp? Asked Amanda. Getting more women? Suggested Lori. Vera shook her head. Unfortunately, there's plenty in this city. No, we'd need some other method to get them all. Why don't we just abduct them in case they let out where they are going? So how do we do it? Vera asked. Amanda held up her hand. Yes, I think we should just kidnap them all. Keep them under with chloroform or jab them with some sedative or whatever they use now. Take them out to the lodge. Tie them up. Then let them awake and tell them why they are being changed and read the spell to them. When they are unconscious with the spell, we hightail it out of the area and leave them to their own devices. What do you all think? Vera thought for a second or two. Yes, it would be better to take them there when they are completely unconscious or hooded. We wouldn't want them to see us or get any clues about our identity or where they were. But I think they should know it's a punishment, Rose insisted. Vera saw the others looking a little worried. I'm for telling them, too. That would work, but kidnapping could give us a lot of time in jail if we were caught. Yeah, but if we were caught and found to have changed them, what would the law say about that? Witchcraft? Aggravated assault? We'll just have to be extra careful so we won't be caught, or even under any suspicion, added Amanda. We'd have to drug them preferably, in our own transportation or something like that, Rose said. We are women, and, let's face it, not as physically strong. Any one of us would find it an effort to move an unconscious man. We wouldn't have the strength. We'd need 2 or more of us for any of them. One Friday evening 2 weeks later, Brad Woodcock ran his hands through his hair, stretched and looked at the desk in front of him. He had just cleared all the papers in his tray, cleared the mail on his computer, and even made up one small speech and the outlines of another. He put his arms behind his head and stretched back in his office chair. He had signed quite a number of documents. Yes, he was getting his name better known. He was so pleased with himself that he had given Marlene, his assistant, an embrace. She had just left. He thought she hadn't objected as much when he put his hands round her, and she had only broken away when he slid his hands down to her, but maybe he had a chance there? Anyhow, it was time to go home, but first. A good stiff relaxing drink first at the bar round the corner? That felt like a good reward. He was sitting at the bar and had just had the first sip of his usual martini when he saw a young woman pushing towards him, her manner slightly embarrassed and nervous. He looked up at her with interest. She was dark-haired and looked as if she was in her mid-20s. She was slim and small, but still had a nicely curved figure. Excuse me, I'm sorry to intrude, but aren't you Brad Woodcock? I heard you speak at that meeting 2 weeks ago, the one where the congressman announced his impending retirement, and I just wanted to say I was very impressed by what you said. I agree completely. You know, you should think about running for office. He wondered if she was coming on to him. He had met more than his share of women who latched onto rising politicians, but still, she might be sincere. He would use it to his advantage, regardless. Thank you, miss. Oh, I'm Mary St. Clair. Rose had decided not to use her real name. They shook hands and she gave a slight squeeze back when he took her soft hand in his. After that the conversation seemed to go well. The girl was a great conversationalist, but she also listened attentively to what he said and she pressed him to talk about his ideas. She even asked his opinion about some problem after he had to go to the restroom, but he also noticed that she had another button on her blouse undone. I took the liberty of ordering you another drink, she said. I like hearing what you have to say. So this woman was coming on to him. He thought. This could be a good night. 10 minutes later Brad thought the evening was going extremely well. He had put his hand over hers and she had not objected. She had even put her hand on his knee. But suddenly the woman looked at her watch and gasped. Gosh, I'm sorry, Brad. I didn't realize it was so late. It's about time I got home and had some supper. He thought this girl had definite possibilities. Yeah, me too. It was nice talking to you. Say, I'm hungry too. I tell you, do you want to catch a bite to eat? The Italian place round the corner all right? She gave him a big smile. That sounds great. But finish your drink. They were barely out of the door together when he suddenly felt woozy. He was in no position to object when a black van stopped by them, the side door slid open and he was pushed inside. He allowed himself to slide into unconsciousness. So a date rape drug works on men too. Okay, Amanda, I've got his car keys, said Rose. I'll take his car and drop it off in one of the rough areas. Follow me and then we'll meet Vera for the next on our list. Father Ignacio Rosa had closed and locked his office for the evening and decided it was time to head home. Then, as he usually did, he took a last check round the church. He had a surprise and had to peer into the shadows at the back. There was a woman in one of the back pews, her head leaning onto the pew in front of her. She was not moving at all, and he began to feel apprehension, then she gave a small sob. Ma'am, are you all right? The woman's face slowly lifted from the pew and looked at him. He was shocked to see it was tear-stained. He thought. Her makeup is smudged and she's a bit older, but she's still quite good-looking. As if surprised, she straightened up in the pew, wiped her eyes and smoothed her dress. He noticed her figure was quite slim too and her bust pushed out her dress nicely. Ma'am, can I help? She seemed quite flustered. Oh, Father, it's late and you must want to get home. I'm sorry to intrude. This isn't my usual church either, but I was widowed just a year ago. She wiped the corner of her eye with a handkerchief. It's just that today is the anniversary of my husband's passing away. I was walking past the church when I just suddenly felt very lonely and upset and I just had to come in to say a prayer. Thank you, it has helped. I'll be on my way now and not bother you. She seemed to falter slightly as she got up and he went to support her. It gave him a chance to put his arm around her. A nice slim waist, he thought. The lady is older, but still in good shape. I'd better see you to your car, ma'am. She shook her head. No, please, it's all right. I live not too far away and I'll be all right. This has really helped. Look, I think you are still upset. I suggest you come here tomorrow morning and we can talk. I'm used to counseling people in need. I'm sure that will help. You sure it won't be too much trouble? No trouble at all. Thank you, Father Rosa. So you know my name, he thought. I'll see you out to the street. There are stairs down from the church and I don't mind helping you. Both his hands were occupied helping Vera down the stairs, and he had just got to the sidewalk when he was aware of a figure come up behind them and he felt something prick his neck. He felt faint almost immediately, and as a black van drew up and opened its doors he almost fell inside. "That's good, Rose," said Vera. "Two of them. Amanda, can you help me push the politician over a bit so we can get this one stowed away?" Later that evening, de Marventry had just set a new girl up on a corner, and he was going back along the 3-block section he called his territory to check on his first girl when he stopped. There was a strange girl standing on the street opposite. He stared at her, his annoyance growing. This bitch must have been new to the hood, as it was well known on the street that this section was reserved for his girls. A few threats and judicious beatings, if necessary, had kept other hookers or rival pimps away. He was about to cross the street to tell her to move on, but something about the girl made him hesitate. Her body language was awed and undecided, not that of a seasoned whore. He wondered if she was new at it, and he stood for some minutes under an awning to study her. He decided she looked quite pretty. That flowing red hair would attract customers. But her clothes were not quite right, her skirt just a little too long, just a bit too colorless and too loose as well, and her heels too low. She looked amateurish. He had an idea. If she was just starting in the business, he could probably take her into his own string, by persuasion or threats or drugs or whatever worked. With a little guidance in her choice of outfits and makeup, she might become a good earner for him. At last he decided and sauntered across the street, taking his time so she would see him coming. "Evening, girl. I ain't seen you here before." Yes, he thought, an amateur or starter. She was wearing a pale lipstick, if any. She'd need to get a more appropriate color. She looked at him suspiciously. No. Her hands were twitching and her whole manner was very nervous. So why's a pretty girl like you standing out on the street here?" She blushed. "I'm waiting for someone," she stammered. "And who would that be?" "Yeah, girl, I've been wondering too if anyone at all would do. Some man with enough money for you?" He watched as she blushed and her face tightened. He let his voice soften a bit. "Yes, I thought so." He put on a solicitous look and voice. "Look, girl, it's dangerous for you to be by yourself. You need someone to protect you. You know, I could manage you, guide you like." He stood aside to let someone pass by him, but suddenly the girl grabbed both his wrists and there was a pad over his nose and mouth, and he tasted the sweet choking smell of chloroform. He was almost unconscious when a van drove up to them and Amanda and Vera bundled him into the back. Mike Gunther had just turned the corner to his apartment block when he saw a young woman fumbling with the security code pad at the entrance. She seemed to be having trouble and even took a piece of paper from her purse and looked at it as if to check the entry code. She tried again and it still did not open when she tried it. She looked round, obviously exasperated. It must be a new tenant, he thought. The stupid bitch must not have copied it right. He wanted in and she was blocking his way. Impatiently he went to her, ready to give her the edge of his tongue when he saw she was very pretty. Her dark blonde hair was a bit short, but she had nice features and appealing red lips. "That could be a different matter. Having trouble, miss? Let me try." He had the door open with no trouble. "You must be new here?" He gave her a welcoming grin. "I'm Mike." Lori gave him a grateful smile. "I couldn't get this door to open. Obviously it needed a man's touch. Thank you for your help." Mike moved aside to let an older woman pass, then he felt a jolt at his back as if he had been kicked and he almost collapsed. Lori and Vera guided his unresisting body into the back of the van. He felt a prick on his neck and darkness fell over him. "That stun gun works well," Vera observed. "Fast too. I'm impressed." Like they had done to the others, the women fitted him with a ball gag, handcuffed his wrists behind him, shackled his ankles and put a hood over his head. They threw a dark sheet over the 4 unconscious figures. Vera beamed at Lori. "That's all 4 of them all now. We'd better get out to that lodge as soon as we can. But these shots we gave them should keep them quiet too. If necessary we can give them another. I'll drive there. We'll just go and pick up your friend and we can get going." 10 minutes later Lori guided Vera to a small apartment block. She entered and 10 minutes later came out with a dark-haired young man. Vera hid her relief. Their plans now depended on Jim. Vera, this is Jim. He's the one I told you about. Pleased to meet you, Jim, said Vera. So you know roughly what's going to happen? She asked cautiously, sizing him up. Yes, he looked sincere. I can't believe I'm getting this chance. But I mean Lori, it's marvelous what it did for her. Good. But let me go over this again. I'll tell you as I drive. She noticed him look warily at the contents in the back of the van. Yes, we've got them all ready for the next part of their exciting new lives. And you will help. Now let's get going. As they drove, she explained to Jim their ideas and plans for the men. Your part, Jim, is to help us get these 4 men out of the van and get them ready. They should all be unconscious for several hours. That will be enough time to get them to the lodge. There, we will strip them all naked and tie them to chairs. We'll give you a small book with a page marked on it. When they're all awake, you will read the contents of the page out loud, so the men can all hear it. The words will not make sense, but all you have to do is sound them out. You will then read out a statement to them from us. We will be there, but well out of sight so they don't see our faces. They will start to shiver and then change. It won't matter if they see you, as your body, face and appearance are going to change too. Drastically. Are you okay with that? She watched Jim swallow nervously. Yes, he said hoarsely. What will happen is that in a few minutes you will all start to shiver more and more strongly until you all fall unconscious. Yes, you too. We will come and take you back to my place, but we will leave the others there. They will be untied, but we will have no further dealings with them other than leaving them in some women's clothing. For you, we will take care of you during your transformation, as it will take about a couple of days before you feel fully wide awake. After that, we will give you all the help we can when you awake and get you to adapt to a woman's life. You will need help with clothing and how to carry yourself, many things. Lori will be able to tell you what you will go through. Lori placed her hand reassuringly on Jim's arm. I already discussed it with him. He's keen to get it over with. Vera was acting confident and assured, but she was actually nervous. There were still too many things that could go wrong. She made sure to drive just a bit under the speed limit and use as many side roads as she could. It would be disastrous if the police stopped them, but they had no trouble, and 5 hours later they reached the lodge. By the time they had the men out of the van, stripped and tied to chairs on the lodge's veranda, the eastern sky was getting lighter. At last they were ready. Vera handed Jim the book. Here you are, Jim. I've marked the page for you. Just read it slowly, and that page only. You will soon fall unconscious, but we'll be watching and come back for you. That's why we used the veranda. We will be able to see all that happens. An important time in your life, Jim. You will wake up as a woman, Lori said, giving him a hug. She was rewarded with a smile, a worried one, but a smile. Amanda looked at their prisoners. She slapped the face of the politician. He gave a grunt and his eyes flickered. Yes, they're waking. The women watched until all of their prisoners were beginning to open their eyes. All right, we don't want them to see our faces. Time we were not here. Jim, now we leave it up to you. The 4 women drove to a small hill that overlooked the lodge. Busy night, observed Vera. But it will do some good. It will improve the world, said Rose. I just need sleep. Or coffee, yawned Amanda. Me too, said Vera. I'm too nervous for sleep, said Lori. It's just about full light now. What's happening down there? Rose checked through her binoculars. I got these for bird watching. I never thought I'd be looking at naked men. Oh, they must all be awake now. I see them struggling in the chairs. I think they're yelling too, but we're too far away to hear them. She passed the binoculars to Vera. I see Jim, Vera said. He's got the book in his hands. He must be reading it. The men are struggling even more. Rose nibbled the end of a red polished fingernail while they watched. God, this had better work. Otherwise, what do we do? A good few years in jail, said Amanda, only slightly jokingly. Vera glared at her. It's no laughing matter. Black humor, I guess, apologized Amanda. Several minutes later Vera gave a cry. Yes, I see Jim shaking a bit too. Oh yes, Rosa as well, and the pimp. Now the others. It's working on them all. All right, gang. Let's get down and do our stuff, then we'll get Jim into the car and head back home. When they got to the lodge, all of the men were completely unconscious and 2 of them had even started the shimmering phase. They untied them and carried them into the lodge, just laying them on the floor. They waited nervously 2 more hours until the figures had gone through all the changes, then pulled out the women's clothing they had bought. It would have been nice to have the bras fit them, but we'd no way of knowing what size they will be. These sports bras will have to do, said Vera. Hell, let them wear bras that are too tight, or not tight enough, grinned Amanda. Then, one by one, on the unconscious figures, they pull panties, then pantyhose onto them. Oh yes, I've thought of a special touch. She brought out another bag and shook out 4 white garments. Panty girdles? Asked Vera. What on earth for? We'll put these on them too. When they wake up and need to pee, that will be something else they'll have to think about as they wriggle out of them, or try to. Vera looked at the white girdles skeptically. I'm not sure about these. She gave a wry smile. I remember how much trouble it was when I had to wriggle into a girdle. And putting them on others when they are unconscious and can't help? Oh, these have zippers on them. Come on, it'll make it easier. Several minutes later they had finished. Phew, said Vera, mopping her brow. I'm glad I'm not a corsetier. One last touch, said Amanda. She pulled something out of a pocket. What's that? Asked Lori. Just some crazy glue. I'll put it on the zippers and it will seal them into their girdles. Oh, you are nasty, laughed Vera. They finished with pulling short dresses onto the figures, and finally slipping their feet into light women's shoes, and finally lifted the unconscious figures into the lodge. Vera shook her head. You know, they are all hairy and blotchy, but the spell will make beautiful women out of them. Too bad it didn't make them into ugly hags. She looked round and clapped her hands together. We're done. She took out a camera and took shots of the 4 women. What's that for? Asked Rose. Oh, just a memento of what we did. All right, gang, let's get going. Amanda and Lori picked Jim up, laid him in the back of the van, and they headed back to the city by the same back roads. Amanda was driving, while the others watched impressed at the changes on Jim. In his place was a young woman, hairy but completely female. Back in the city they carried him into the room that had been used for Lori. Vera looked at her co-conspirators. We've had a busy time. Now, go home and get some rest. Amanda, you should get into work as usual on Monday and see what the reaction is when your boss doesn't appear. I'm sure I'll still be exhausted, complained Amanda, but maybe I'd better drag myself in. Lori, you and I can look after Jim. Did he mention a female name he wanted? I don't think he did. Well, I suppose that can wait until she wakes, though she'll need proper fitting women's clothes just like you did, and a lot of instructions. She looked Lori up and down. I think you've taken well to your change and you show good taste. You'll make a good mentor. Lori blushed prettily. Thank you, Vera. Vera was impressed with Lori. From the withdrawn, colorless young man that Ken had been, Lori was developing into a vivacious, stylish, young woman. At the lodge it had taken almost 2 days for the 4 new women to wake fully. They were cold and stiff in the unheated building and increasingly confused, bewildered and angry. Horror struck at discovering bras then breasts under their dresses. They all tore off the obviously women's clothes. More and more fearful at what they would find, they struggled with the tight girdles, eventually forcing them off or tearing the fabric. They grazed or tore their skin, but they did not care in their desperation. They then screamed again in despair when they discovered the extent of their new bodies. They spent most of the time that day going through a succession of gasps, screams, tears, panic and despair to finally a whimpering acceptance that they were not dreaming. Frantic searching of the lodge revealed nothing else to wear, and red-faced, cursing, one by one, avoiding facing the others, they put the women's panties, pantyhose and dresses back on. All totally refused to put on the girdles again, and two refused to put on bras, but soon, with their breasts sliding uncomfortably in their dresses and their nipples rubbing whenever they moved, they relented, but cursing. "What's happened to us?" the former Damar asked, when they were more coherent after the hours of panic and terror. "All I can remember is being on a street corner talking to a red-haired woman. Then I was here, tied to a chair, and some man was telling us something about being made into a woman for things we did. Then I must have fallen asleep. And I woke up like this. Something I did to women? Hell, all I ever did was slap a few hoes to keep them in line. Now we're in this wilderness, God knows where. Looks like hell there too." They were all on the veranda, and he gestured at the surrounding woods, now only filled with the skeletons of burned trees. "Slapping whores? You were a pimp?" said the former Ignacio, letting her distaste show. "Yeah, what of it? What did you do?" "I did nothing," she said hastily. "But it much the same with me," she protested. "I was outside my church helping a woman, then woke up here, and I remembered that man telling us something, and I fell asleep again and woke up like this." "Where are we?" "Your church?" asked another. "You were a preacher or something?" Red-faced, the former Ignacio did not reply, remembering the women in his past. "I'd been just about to go into my apartment block," said the former Mike. "There was a blonde trying to get in. Then, like you guys, I only remember someone telling us something, and I woke up like this. I did nothing wrong. Sure, I ordered a few women around, but men too. In business you can't be sentimental. I was in a bar with a woman, then nothing until I woke up like this. I'm in a woman's body and I don't know where I am," said the former Brad. "But that guy who was here, who was reading something to us, he's gone." "What's happened to him?" "You know, if he fell asleep too and changed, like us, he either wandered away or someone took him. So there could be more people involved." "Look," said the former Ignacio. "We need to work together. Something crazy has happened, but it's made us into women. We have to find out where we are, then get out of here and back to the city. We can't stay here, there's no food. Then we have to get back home and find out why this happened. We need to get to a hospital." "And what would they do? Laugh at us? Who'd believe us? Who'd want to do this to us?" said the former Mike. "Why? Don't you remember?" said the former pimp. "That guy was reading something that was to change us, make us think of how women lived." She looked down at her body, two prominent breasts pushing out the top of her dress. "Now I've got tits and a pussy like a woman. The son of a bitch. I'll roast him over a slow fire." "Yeah, but he'd better change us back first." They argued back and forward. "We have to stick together, contact the police," said the former priest. The former Mike snorted at him. "And what do we say? That we were men and some magic changed us? They'd just laugh at us. Same at any hospital." "I suppose you've a better idea," said the former Damar. "And you do?" said the former priest. "I haven't heard any ideas from you." "Shut your fucking mouth. Mind your language. No mealy-mouthed preacher son of a bitch orders me around. I'll talk any way I want." All were emotional, frustrated and on edge. Tempers flared and the pimp pushed the former priest. When the other pushed back, they leaped on each other. The former pimp had been a skilled street fighter and soon beat the other to the ground and began kicking the prostrate body. "Hey, steady on," said the former Brad. "And what will you do about it?" "Shut up or you'll get the same." She slapped and punched the former Brad. The two others looked at each other and the former Mike leaped on her. They wrestled on the ground until the former politician picked up a rock and smashed it over the former pimp's head. She collapsed on the ground. They felt desperately at the figure on the ground. "Shit. She's not breathing. She's dead." "You've killed her," the former Mike gasped. The former Brad was gasping. "It was self-defense." She had beaten that one and she would have done the same to us. What now? We bury her, of course. But this place looks so remote, I don't think anyone would ever be found. Just in case anyone comes checking, we'd better bury her in the woods, maybe over there. God damn it! There better be a shovel here someplace. Searching around in an outhouse, they eventually found a shovel and dug a shallow hole in some sandy soil in a clearing in the nearest woods, cursing at the tree roots and the weakness of their female bodies. They dragged the dead pimp into it, put the earth back over it and covered it over with brush. I don't think it will ever be found, but it's another reason for getting out of here, said the former Brad. Yeah, but which way? The former Mike pointed. There's a track of sorts to here, we'll just have to follow it back till it gets to some main road. What about her? Brad pointed to the unconscious former priest. At that the figure groaned and turned over. We have to help her, get her out of here. Are you crazy? Said Mike. We can't carry her. We'll just have to leave her. Yes, we can send help. All right, let's get going. Several miles down the road they came to T-junction. So, which way now? Asked Mike. We could wait until something comes along, said Brad. Then what do we say? Just that we were out hiking and got lost. Wearing dresses and pantyhose and these flimsy shoes? Who'd believe us? Give me a break. That's a dumb idea, snarled Mike. So maybe you can come up with some idea, smartass. Yeah, a good idea not to be with you. The woman who had been Mike suddenly bent her head and put a hand to her ear. I think I hear traffic somewhere in the distance. There may be a main road there. Have it your way. I can't hear it, so I'm staying here. My feet are killing me. These shoes are about worn out anyway. The woman who had been Mike shrugged and set off down the road. She had walked another 5 miles when she began to get her hopes up. The occasional noise of traffic was getting louder. Another 2 miles further on she saw a ribbon of road and a truck go past. As soon as she got to the road she would wave someone down. Henry Garrow was driving his truck along the winding road. The area was known for its beautiful wooded scenery and the snow-tipped mountains on the horizon, but his mind was not on it. He was going over his plans, working out details. It paid to be careful. The last 5 times had gone well with no police sniffing around. Hell, maybe no one even knew that the women were missing. They had been hookers, after all. No one kept tabs on them. About 50 miles further on the road would meet the interstate, and a truck stop just a bit beyond that was a good hunting ground. There would be enough hookers hanging around. As usual, he'd entice one into the truck, drug her and head to the place he used. If the woman satisfied him and was accommodating enough, he might let her live, but otherwise? Then again, few women had done everything he wanted. As he rounded a curve he blinked. A figure had run into the road, waving at him. When he got nearer he saw it was a woman in a dress, and as he drew the truck to a stop he saw she was a bit disheveled and dirty, but even so, quite pretty. He rolled down his window as the woman hobbled up to the truck. She looked a bit distraught. Please, I'm lost, she gasped. Can you give me a ride out of here? Well, missy, said Henry. I'd be right glad to do so. Where do you want to go? I don't know. I'm lost. To some city. And how did you get lost? We're miles from anywhere any size. Oh, what's your name, my darling? The woman burst into tears. It's Mike, I mean Michaela. This one looked confused and exhausted, he thought. That would make it all the easier. All right, hold on. He got out. Let me help you up into the truck. Nice-looking figure too, he thought, as he pushed her up into the cab. He had his hand on her ass and she didn't notice. This was just too easy, he thought, as he put the truck into gear. Maybe it was a trap, but as they got further down the road he breathed easier. The woman was confused or something, stumbling over her name, not knowing where she was from, and had no idea how she happened to be where she was. She was either half crazy or genuinely lost, but what was certain was she had a good figure. Pretty face too under the grime and sweat. He wondered how she would be when he had her at his place. She could make for a few days of good entertainment. If she objected, well, then she'd join the others under the dirt. Some miles back, the former Brad waited at the junction. He had watched the former Mike walk out down the road, her figure getting smaller and smaller until it disappeared over a rise just a mile or so down the road. After several hours, she began to feel worried. She was getting colder and there was a continual dull ache of hunger from her stomach. Maybe they would have been better to stick together, but now she was stuck. Maybe Mike would have got someone to come for her. She suddenly caught a noise. There was a distant roar, growing stronger, then round the bend swept a motorcycle. Mort Timon had been pushing his Harley along the road, occasionally opening the throttle to its maximum and sweeping round the curves, kicking up dust and gravel to work off his frustration. He had had a fight with the rest of the gang, just because one of the women, a stupid bitch, had died after some rough sex, and now they had sent him out to get another one. They told him not to come back until he had. How the hell was he going to do that? Pull some hooker off the street? He peered over the handlebars and wiped some dust off his goggles. What was that ahead? A motorcycle was coming to her. She panicked at the look of the large-bellied, bearded, black leather-clad rider and ran back into the woods, but he had spotted her, stopped his cycle and lumbered after her. It took only a minute to catch her. He caught her arm. "Well, what have we here? What are you doing here, lady? You shouldn't be out here on your own. Wouldn't you like to come with me?" She shook her arm. "Let me go," she cried. She shrank at the large fat man, dressed in dark dirty leather and denim, a straggly beard halfway down the grubby t-shirt over his chest. "I said, who are you, lady? What are you doing here, all the way away from town? I think you should come with me. Please," she pleaded. "I was kidnapped." She tried to shake off his hold. "Take me to the police." He gave a low laugh and spat into the brush. "Well, you see, a man like me don't really hold with the police. But I have a place about an hour from here. I think you should come with me. I'll introduce you to some of my friends. We can treat you real nice." "No, I'll stay here." Her face rocked as she was hit over the face. Half conscious, her arms were jerked behind her, tied with a dirty bandana, and she was lifted over his shoulder. She kicked her feet, but he struck her on her thighs. "Quit your yelling or it'll be the worse for you." Back at the lodge, the figure gradually regained consciousness. She cried out, but when no one came she realized she was completely alone. The others had abandoned her. Shivering, she crawled into the lodge and spent another night shivering. There were no blankets, but she pulled some dusty curtains from the window and wrapped herself in them. They only just worked and she shivered all through the night. She desperately thought of her options. Her body hurt all over and she could barely move from her beating, but she would have to get away. She was hungry and the hunger ache in her stomach was worse. All she had was some water from a single faucet that seemed to be working. It was a day later still when she heard voices. She pulled herself up to a window and looked out to see an old truck. Down from it climbed two men and a woman. The men were bearded, long-haired and in overalls, the woman in a long tattered dress. She staggered out. "Help me, please." She fell to her knees. They looked at her in astonishment and ran to her as she collapsed on the ground. "What in hell has happened here? How come she's out here in this wilderness?" growled one of the men. He turned her over. "She's been beaten." "So what do we do with her?" asked the woman. "We have to help her. Take her to hospital or the police. You know we don't hold with these things. We can take her back to the commune with us. Then she can decide." Vera and the other women all met a week after and once again she set them round her large dining room table. "It looks as if I am the chair of this group," she laughed. "All right, a call to order." She slapped the table. "Maybe I should get a gavel. So, first business, we need updates. Lori, you had offered to take Jim in hand. Give us a report." First, it's no longer Jim, as you would expect. She decided to take the name Julie. I don't have to tell you all about her reactions when she woke up. You've all seen it with me. Actually, it was a bit frightening for me. But I can tell you she's delighted with the effects, just like me. Like me, it was a day or so after she woke up that I got her to move around and start into her new life. It's a steep learning curve, but I had been through it and I could guide her. She's had some problems and she'll have more, I'm sure, but she's worked these out and she's adapting well. In fact, we're out shopping the other day for more clothes for her and had a great time. I think you should all be happy and confident for her. She's staying with me until she gets on her feet, but she's been looking for her own place. I'll bring her along sometime. That's good, said Vera. Yes, we should see her sometime and check on her. We all can help if necessary too. She looked at the others. Next thing, maybe our main business, the 4 men we changed. Amanda, you go first. What happened at your office when the boss, Mike Gunther, failed to show up for work? As the Monday went on, they got more and more worried. Eventually someone went to his apartment, and when they found he wasn't there, they contacted his father. I gather the police were eventually notified, but they were not really interested at first, and it was almost a week before some detectives came around and started asking questions. They didn't ask me anything. Mike's brother has taken over, so the office business is going on without much of a hitch. He's much more pleasant to work with. I haven't heard any more. Same at the church, Vera said. One of my friends is in that congregation. She said that inquiries were made about Rosa when he didn't appear on the Sunday, and the police were called after 2 days, but no one actually appeared too concerned. Apparently, the bishop had just been given a very detailed and strong letter from a bunch of female parishioners. It had a whole list of complaints about Rosa, serious ones. Maybe he'll actually be relieved if Rosa has disappeared. It could be that he suspects Rosa got wind of the complaints and took off. In fact, I think the bishop counting himself lucky. What about the politician, Brad? Rose, you were looking at that. Yes, there was mild consternation as he was due to chair some meetings, and the police were also eventually called. But, for the work he did? There's enough other ambitious would-be politicians and possible rivals in his office all too happy to take his place. They're all quite practiced at backstabbing, figuratively, I mean. In fact, most would be happy if he was out of the scene for good. I haven't heard anything more. And the pimp? I was supposed to check on that, said Amanda. I even walked up and down the street where his girls were placed. I recognized one of them out, peddling her wares, so to speak, and asked her, carefully, of course, why she was on her own, but she did not know anything about him. She isn't worried enough to raise an outcry about him either, because she'll be able to keep all her earnings to herself now. She was quite definite that she would not contact the police, and I gather it's the same with all the rest of his girls. In fact, it looks as if they'd all be delighted if he never reappeared. Amanda shrugged. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be surprised if she and the rest fell into the hands of other pimps. Maybe our committee could give its attention to these other pimps in the future. Vera looked round the others. Let's see how this all works out first. I doubt if anyone will go looking for the pimp, so that's just the 3 disappearances the police will be investigating. Have any of you seen or heard news reports about our subjects? I've checked on various media, newspapers, the radio and television, and I've heard only one snippet. You see, apparently, about 30 miles from the lodge, the police stopped a motorcycle driven by some gang member. The rider had a police record, but slung in front of him was a woman with her hands tied. The report says she was totally incoherent and distraught, so they can't get any believable story from her. Her description doesn't match any missing woman. Now she's in some hospital under observation. I wonder? For the other 3, I can't help wondering how they are finding their new lives, but I'm not going to go looking. She saw nothing from her committee but shaking heads. No news is good news, she thought. So, who could her committee look at next? She wondered. There was a porn film producer that looked like a good candidate. It was 2 months later when Vera was again working at the shelter. She was alone. The door was open as it was a warm day. She heard a knock and a shuffling sound, then a figure, a dirty woman in rags, staggered into the shelter. Vera was horrified by the woman's appearance and sat her in a chair. "What is it? You look exhausted," she cried, but there was no reply. The woman was only muttering incoherently. There was some milk in the refrigerator and Vera offered it to the woman, who sipped it and then drank it down greedily. "Who are you?" Vera cried. "What has happened to you?" At last the muttered words began to get strung together, but still in random phrases. They made no sense. Vera looked in the refrigerator again and found some leftover sandwiches. The woman downed them greedily and croaked her thanks. "What's your name?" Vera asked again. The woman looked at her blankly. "Name? I got no name. I lost it. And I'm lost." Vera was puzzled. "What happened to you?" she asked again. "You wouldn't believe it." "No one does," the woman muttered. "No one does." "How do you mean?" "You won't believe me." "Try me," Vera cried. The woman muttered again, her voice in a whisper. "You see a woman. Well, I wasn't always. I was once a man, I had a business then. Something happened, I don't know what, and now I'm like this. I'm cursed." She began to cry but wiped her eyes and her face with a ragged sleeve and parted her straggly greasy hair. Vera stared at the worn lined face in front of her and a cold chill took her heart. "Oh shit!